Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. I want to talk to you about something I think we all wrestle with, and it's being humble enough to learn and bold enough to help others grow. Let me start with a question though. How many of you, Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. I want to talk about something I think we all wrestle with, and that's being humble enough to learn and bold enough to help others grow. I want to start with a question. How many of you have ever used the wrong tool for the job? Maybe that's a butter knife that you try to pry something open, or a screwdriver when you need a chisel. My dad was a master at this. He's the kind of guy who thinks, why rent the right tool when I can make this one sort of work, even if it takes 10 times longer? And growing up, that drove me nuts. I'd be out there helping him thinking, Dad, if you would have just got the right tool, we would have been done by now and I could be playing already. And that picture sticks in my mind because sometimes in life and in ministry, within church context, we try to use the wrong tools. We make things work, but not very effectively. Now, that brings me to a guy in the Bible named Apollos. Acts chapter 18 tells us that Apollos was eloquent, smart, passionate, and bold. He was out there preaching Jesus, but his understanding it wasn't complete yet. He only knew of John's baptism. So, in other words, he was working, but with the wrong tool. He had the passion, but the message wasn't quite sharpened. Now, here's where things get interesting because there's a ministry couple, husband and wife, named Priscilla and Aquila. Now, they hear him speaking, and they're probably impressed with his speaking abilities and his arguments and his ability to reason with people and vigorously debate them. But instead of embarrassing him or even shutting him down, they pull him aside and they quietly explain the way of God more accurately. Now, Apollos, he listens. He doesn't push back, and he doesn't act like he knows it all. He receives it because he is humble enough to be teachable, and he went on to become a powerful leader in the early church. So that challenges me because I've been Apollos. I've been passionate, but rough around the edges and sometimes ineffective. When Cassie and I were just getting started out in ministry, I remember being so frustrated that the men in our church weren't signing up to help with an outreach event that we were organizing. And I got a hold of an old email list. There was an email that I received from the pastor, um, sent to a bunch of men in the church. So I copied and pasted all their email addresses, and basically blasted them with a message scolding them for being lazy. I thought I was being bold. I thought I was being courageous to say, hey, we need to step up. And then after that was sent, my pastor called me and said, I appreciate your passion, but that's not the way to do it. And he was right. I needed someone to quietly pull me aside, give me the critique and correction, polish me up. And I'm glad he did. That also, if you're a sports fan, I'm a fan of motocross and dirt bikes. So this is my illustration, a way to connect these things. When teams look for riders, they would rather have someone fast, even if he crashes a lot. Because usually what they say is that we can work with speed. They can coach the crashing out of you. And Apollos was like that. He was fast, bold, passionate, but he needed someone to come alongside him and shape that passion so that he could actually be effective. And that's the beauty of discipleship. It's not just about conversion. It's not just about getting someone to say a prayer or say that they're a Christian or say they're saved. Paul didn't just make converts, he made disciples. He strengthened them, he mentored them, encouraged them, and then would equip them to grow. And that's what Jesus actually told us to do in the Great Commission. He said, go make disciples, baptize them, and then teach them to obey everything he commanded. And here's the part that hits close to home. It's the being teachable part. In the body of Christ, we actually probably don't need more people who are know-it-alls but act like jerks. We're in an age where knowledge is not hard to come by. We need people that do have the knowledge. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. We need people that know a lot, yes, but they're humble enough to learn from other people. And maybe that just means, how do I deliver the message that I know? I know about Jesus, but how can I actually be effective in sharing this with the lost? I've seen this outside the church too. Maybe you've experienced this where Someone gets hired at your work and they're very knowledgeable. They know how to do the work, but they're a jerk to everybody. I know in my experience, it's just like I'm glad you know so much, but you're a pain in the rear and nobody wants to work with you. Like, we're okay if you just leave. We'll find somebody that maybe has less knowledge, but they're able to get along with people. They're humble to learn more things. That's something, you can train in skills, but it's hard to train humility. And I recently heard a story about Frank Turek and Charlie Kirk. Frank had been debating on college campuses for years about spiritual matters. And Charlie reached out to him saying, I need your help in these arguments about life and faith. And Charlie was a brilliant guy, very smart. I'm sure he has a high IQ. He was way ahead in political knowledge, but he was humble enough to admit that he needed teaching in another area. And that humility then opened doors for the gospel to be shared with thousands or even millions of people. And that's what we see in Apollos. He had a willingness to listen to Priscilla and Aquila, who were just tent makers. And it didn't make him weaker that he received it. It made him stronger. He was more useful in God's hands. And that's what I want for myself. That's what I want for you. So let me leave you with two challenges. First, are you humble enough to let someone speak into your life? Maybe it's an uncomfortable correction. Maybe it's something you don't want to hear. But if you let it in, God can use it to make you more effective. And second, are you bold enough to lovingly speak into someone else's life when you see they need it? Not to shame them, but to build them up like Priscilla and Aquila did with Apollos. Because at the end of the day, we're all sinners. We're all sinners in need of grace. Jesus made a way for us to be forgiven and reconciled to God. And it wasn't because we had the right tools and not because we were eloquent like Apollos, but because God loved us. So if you've never turned from your sin and trusted him, don't wait. Confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord. Believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, and let him give you a new heart. And for those of us already following Jesus, let's take this week and pray for just one person that we can serve, love, and share the gospel with. Start there, start small, and let's stay humble and teachable so that God can use us for something bigger than ourselves. I hope this has encouraged you, and I appreciate you listening, and I'll catch you next time.